Uh, we have a guest speaker today, Dr. Emmettt Gill. He's a former student athlete. He currently works in the Department of Social Work on the main campus. He does a lot of research concerning African American athletes, student athletes, and social work. And I talked about before, mentioned briefly this idea of mental health. And a lot of times mental health in the black community is not something that we talk about, but there's also some other social issues a lot of times that are rarely highlighted. So I'm going to let him finish his own introduction and have at it. So you don't have a PowerPoint or anything like that. So a lot of this is going to be conversational, so you all are encouraged to speak and to also pay attention. It's going to be videotaped, so I may be able to get a copy of the video. But basically, I'm going to be taking notes today. And major things that are talked about, topics and things like that, I'll pull out and it might show up on the test. So there's not going to be a PowerPoint for today that I post online, but this will be integrated into some exams later on. All right? You mind if I sit next to you? Okay.
I'll need to get a copy of your notes.
Okay.
Good?
And the attendance should be coming around.
James, do I have an area that I need to stay within? No? Oh, really? Oh, wow. Okay. Good morning. That was sort of weak. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. Thank you so much, Doc, for having me here today. I am also an assistant professor here at UTSA. I'm over in the Department of Social Work. Long and the short of it is, I'm from North Carolina. I'm a former student athlete. I was a baseball player and a walk-on basketball player way back when, probably around the time that a lot of you were born. But I'm still trying to get on somebody's flag football team for intramurals, so, receiver and quarterback. But I really enjoy opportunities to come and speak about athletics and about the intersection between athletics and sports. It's a passion of mine. I won't talk too much about myself, but basically I'm in this business because I understand the power of sport. Where your interests lie have a lot of influence in terms of what you do. I was just watching this weekend. I had an opportunity to go see Straight Outta Compton. How many people saw Straight Outta Compton? All right. How'd that happen before some of y'all were? Some of y'all weren't even listening to rap music then. But, when you're passionate about something, whether it be music or sports, it has a tendency to make you do things that you might not normally do. Just like some of you, if I weren't a student athlete, I probably wouldn't have gone to college. All right, I graduated third to last in my high school class. On the day of graduation, I was really afraid that the principal was going to come and pull me out of line. And when I got to college and played baseball, I was what you call a Proposition 48, which means that I didn't have a high enough score on my SAT to compete my first year. That wasn't enough. I still wasn't all about being a student athlete. And so not only my first and my second semester did I have to sit out, but I had to sit out my third semester. Now, granted, I had some accolades. I was the first in-state recruit to go to UNC and, one of the first black baseball players there, in particular center fielders in the past probably decade, all that stuff. But until I transferred, went to another school, and then had to sit out another semester, and the coach put my bags outside of my apartment. He said, you know what, when you want to go to class, you can get on the field. That's sort of when I turned things around and began to take school seriously. And so before I began talking about mental health in college sports and athletics, for the student athletes and the non-student athletes here, this is the time in your life. You'll never have this opportunity again. I know you hear from a lot of people, whether it's Coach Thompson or whether it's Coach Coker or whether it's the coaches in the other sport, whether it's Coach Hickey, who I still call Coach Hickey. I know you hear from everybody, but trust me, whether you're a student athlete or a non-student athlete, this is the time of your life. There is not another time like this that you will ever experience in your life to have an opportunity to do what you do. So take full advantage of it. College ain't that hard. You show up for class. You figure out what the system is in terms of making it through the class, whether you know you got to read, whether you know you got to show up to class, whether you got to go see your professor. You figure out whatever the system is, because it's always about a system. It's no different from the system that a softball team runs or a baseball team runs or a football team runs. A scheme is a scheme. You figure out what it is. You dedicate yourself to working within it. Coaches call that buying into the system. You buy into the system. And then you excel. And believe me, when I say this, these 4 years will go very quickly, and you'll wish you did some things differently. So take advantage of it. It's a beautiful time in your life. A little bit about me, quickly. I explore the intersection between social work and sports. Does anybody know what social workers do? And don't worry about that camera. The only person that they're going to see on camera is me, so you can feel free to speak freely because nobody's going to see you. What does a social worker do before I start calling on people? What do social workers do? Say what? Work with kids.
Some work with elderly.
Some work with the elderly. What else? Come on, give me a couple more.
Help those in need.
Help those in need. What else? One more. Come on now. One more. They said all the ones. One more. One more. I haven't heard the popular one yet. Yes, sir? Remove kids from homes. That's the one we always hear. Social workers remove kids from homes. But social workers also work in college athletics. Right now, there are about 7% of every athletic department has a social worker working in. In fact, there was a job open at the University of Utah Department of Athletics for a social worker with a starting salary of $75,000. We're different from sports psychologists, social workers who work with athletes, because we work on your performance off the field, not on the field. Sports psychologists work on the field, we work off the field. And so it's a great opportunity in terms of being a social worker. That's not all we do is take folks' kids. Some of us work in the pharmaceutical field. Starting salary for a pharmaceutical rep is around $110,000 a year. You probably work about 25 hours a month, 25 hours a week. But primarily what social workers do is we work from an asset-based perspective. We help people take an inventory of what things that they do well. Once we find out what they do well, given whatever situation they're in, then we try and help them. We look at the interaction between the person and the environment. Because as we know, whether you succeed or fail in this life, it's not all about you as a person. There are a lot of things going out there in the world. There's sexism, there's racism, there's ageism. There are a lot of isms out there. There are things that happen in some communities that people have to deal with that don't happen in other communities. Educational systems in one community might be different from in another. So we as social workers, we take inventory of your asset and we help you work through that. How many folks in here are student athletes? Raise your hand. Okay. How many folks in here may not be student athletes at UTSA, but you've played a sport before? Okay. How many people in here just don't like sports, period? Whew, thank goodness. Are y'all ready for some football? I'm so excited that it's football season. I think my Panthers are going far in the playoffs. Any Panthers fans in here? No? I'm not in the Dallas type Houston Texans room, am I? We got any New York fans in here? New York? Any fans of those teams out west? No? Okay. What's the name of this class? African Americans in sports. Tell me some things that are going on with African American sports today. What do you read in the newspaper? We read domestic violence. Go ahead. Alcoholism. Dog fighting. Okay. What else? I hope y'all writing these down because I need somebody to keep track of these for me. What else? What else are we hearing? Come on now.
Losing fingers.
Losing fingers with fireworks. Yes, that's an interesting one.
Going broke.
Going broke.
Substance abuse.
Substance abuse. Stealing. Yes. Domestic violence. What else? Violence in general in the field, on the locker room. Yes, sir?
They need to pay more.
They need to get paid more? Okay. All right. Give me a couple more. Couple more. Concussions. Haven't heard concussions. All right. And one more. One more. Matter of fact, that gentleman who just walked in, tell me something that's going on with African Americans in sport that we hear in the news, sir.
All right, what has everybody said so far?
Just you go with yours.
Tearing their ACLs.
Okay, we'll take tearing their ACLs. We'll take tearing their ACLs. There's probably not an issue that you mentioned that doesn't have some type of intersection with mental health and social work, or mental health and sports. We can take any of them. One of my favorites to talk about is this issue of concussions, because it's a serious issue. It's a serious issue in the NFL. It's a serious issue in the NCAA. Not just with football, but in sports like soccer and in baseball. One of the primary issues with concussion is that we don't realize is that concussion, when you concuss your brain, it is considered what? What is it? You have done what to your brain? You've damaged it. You've injured it. No different from an ACL, no different from a high ankle sprain, no different from a dislocated shoulder. You have injured your brain. And one of the complications that we see from concussions when we talk about mental health is what? Anybody familiar with it? CTE. Okay, which is a degenerative brain disease. But what else do we also see? CTE, what else do we see? What else do we hear a lot of players talking about? Former players. Say what? Diseases caused by the concussions, or disorders caused by concussions. And what might one of those be? We hear it all the time. Say what? Depression. Who said that? Thank you, sir. Depression. Let's talk about depression a little bit. When you hear about depression, what types of words come to mind? What types of feelings, or how do you characterize it? Yes, sir.
Suicide.
Suicide is one of them. Suicide ideations. What's another? Stress. Stress is another one, or the inability to deal with stress. Give me one more. Sadness. Periods of sadness. Yes. Feeling alone. Anger. Aggression. Sleeplessness. Crying. Inability to form relationships. All of these things can come about from the concussions. And it's not just, the interesting thing about depression is that, it's not something that emanates in particular just from concussions. But I want to stay there for a minute. What are some things that we're also hearing about concussions on the collegiate level?
Being covered up.
Say what?
Being covered up.
I can't hear you.
Being covered up.
Tell me more about that.
And sometimes, especially depending on the athlete, if he is a star athlete, he's prime value to the team. Sometimes they, take consideration of the player to let them call his own shot versus, sitting on timeout.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that, I like to talk about just briefly, and that's making sure that you engage in self-care with regard to concussions, because concussions are serious business. First of all, as a collegiate athlete, if you get a concussion, then you have to think about a few things. You have to think about your plan, and all of us want to get on the field, but you also have to think about your academics, because when you have a concussion, it slows you down academically. And then you say, well, Doc, you started talking about depression. Well, think about when you can't get on the field, and think about when you can't get in the classroom, you can't do well in the classroom. What might that cause? Feelings of sadness, anger, aggression, inability to cope. These are all things that are related to a concussion. A concussion can lead to a mental health issue. depression, CTE, suicidal ideations. Junior Seau, Dave Durison, football player at the University of Pennsylvania, all had histories of concussion. Let's talk about another mental health issue that actually pretty much put me in this game. It was my first publication. It was this gentleman, A Life Cut Short. Anthony Vantour's 22 years were filled with turmoil. Anthony Vantour was a star cornerback at the University of Washington. I'm talking about, he had that speed like I used to have. You know what I'm saying? That 4.3 speed in the 40. I'm serious, y'all. Downhill, though. He was a bad boy. Anthony Vantour was actually rated probably the second-ranked quarterback in the Pac-10. But unfortunately, Anthony Vantour had a mental health disorder that is very prevalent in our society. And let me go back and say this first of all. 1 in 4 athletes suffer from a mental health disorder. That's one for the test, Doc. 1 in 4 athletes suffer from a mental health disorder. That is information that's provided by the 1 in 4 Project, which is a project in Chicago that deals with mental health in athletics. 1 in 4. Okay? 1 in 5 student athletes, or 20%, experience depression sometimes during their playing days. 1 in 5 student athletes, or 20%, experience depression during their playing days. But Anthony Vantour I don't know his concussion history, and it wasn't an issue of depression. See, Anthony Vantour came to the University of Washington with a disorder that we call a bipolar disorder. And a bipolar disorder is a disorder that is characterized by periods of highs and periods of lows. There are 2 types of bipolar disorders. There's bipolar disorder 1, and there's bipolar disorder 2. All right? Bipolar disorder 1 is marked by periods of depression over a period of at least 2 years. Bipolar 2 is marked by depression, but it's also marked by periodic manic episodes. By manic, I mean, have you ever had a friend, a classmate, a teammate, they all hyped all the time? They just hyped, Sometimes they're excited, sometimes they're irritable, but their personality level is way up here. That's manic. And it's exactly what it sounds like. Well, Anthony Vantour came to the University of Washington with a bipolar disorder. Just a little bit of my history. I worked as an academic advisor and learning specialist with the University of Maryland football team. I also worked at West Point as an academic performance counselor. And a number of student athletes that I worked with had a bipolar disorder. Why was that relevant to my job? Because a bipolar disorder is considered to be a disability for which you have a right to disability services, which in turn impacts services or accommodations that you receive in class. Vantour had a bipolar disorder. First year, Anthony Vantour, second team, all Pac-10. What happens sometimes when athletes are successful on the field? What happens when they success? Say what? They happy? You have a great year, you're happy. What might you do that summer? Say what? Do stuff you ain't supposed to do. Somebody else said party. What else? Drink. You kick it, right? Well, after Anthony Vantour's freshman year, he decided to do just that. Had fun, kicked it, did things he wasn't supposed to do, drank it up, partied. But he forgot to do one thing. He forgot to take his medications that he used for his bipolar disorder. So he went to the second season. He went to the second season more than 6 months without taking his meds for his bipolar disorder. Now you have to understand, when we talk about mental health disorders, a lot of people say, well, people just crazy. And that's not the way we look at it as social workers. We look at it from two standpoints. One, your biological makeup contributes a lot to your propensity towards depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, being schizophrenic, having anxiety disorders like a Ricky Williams, all right, or having a substance abuse disorder. Okay? So it's your biological makeup. But it's not only that. It's your interaction with the environment that you have. You have certain triggers in the environment that can trigger the condition. But back to Anthony Von Tour. 6 months without his meds. He went back to, I guess you call it, what do you call it in football when y'all got camp? Boot camp? That's not what y'all call it. There's some football players in here. What y'all call it, huh? Camp? You just call it camp? So when you go to camp, you know, like the first few weeks before the season starts. So you go to camp. So he went to camp. Went to camp, started getting in fights. Started showing up late for practice. Started getting in arguments with coaches. Before you know it, Anthony Von Tour suspended for the first 3 games of the season. Had a subpar season. Suspended for the last 4 games of the season. Goes from second team All Pac-10 to not even being honorable mention. And it got worse. Because, see, what Anthony Von Tour decided was that he didn't want to take his medications because his medications impacted his performance. What he decided was that he didn't need those medications. 3 months after the season, Anthony Von Tour committed suicide. He got in a fight with one of his classmates, one of his teammates. It spilled over into an on-campus, off-campus apartment deal. The cops showed up. He had words with the cop, got into an argument with the cops. Cops left. About an hour later, paramedics called to this particular apartment because Anthony Von Tour was dead. 2 years ago, All Pac-10, destined for the NFL at quarterback. And now he's dead. In large part because he didn't want to take his medications. So there are a lot of intersections between what I do and athletics. What are some of the stressors? And I want to speak specifically about black athletes right now. And I want to speak specifically about college athletes. What are some of the stressors that college athletes have? And you don't have to be an athlete to speak on this, and you don't necessarily have to agree with it, but I want to hear what some of the stressors that you have. Time management. It's difficult managing time between what? Practice, class, and what else you got to do? Family, social relationships, being a regular college student. Time management, number 1. What else? Yes, sir.
Financial problems.
Financial problems. Tell me more. A little bit more. Tell me more about the financial piece.
Like they might not have enough money to, buy food or
Okay. There are a lot of myths about college athletes and how much food they have available and what they can do. You know, the reality is year before last at this time, I was director of student-athlete wellness at North Carolina Central University. And there were a number of student-athletes that didn't have any money for food because they were sending money back home. The few meals that they had in the cafeteria, they were taking things out of the caf so they could have it in their room. That doesn't even count the kids that I was dealing with or working with that had eating disorders. Eating disorders is another mental health issue. And it's not as simple as some people believe it to be. So you got financial issues. Did you know? Write this one down, just in case Doc puts it on the test. Did you know that in Division I sports, in particular the power conferences, that some student athletes leave school after 4 years, $20,000 in debt or more. On average, $4,000 a year, they are in debt. In other words, some student athletes are paying to compete on the field. That's a serious financial stressor. It's a serious financial stressor when you are a student athlete and you finish your 4 years of eligibility, you don't have your degree, but you can't go back to school because You got a hold on, a financial hold for some particular reason. That's a serious financial stressor right there. So we got financial stress, we got time management. What else are we talking about? And I'm talking about black college athletes.
Peer pressure.
Peer pressure. Peer pressure is one of them. And I saw your hand. Peer pressure. What do you mean peer pressure?
Like, getting out of practice, going home, you might have a little drink or something.
Okay.
You need to say no to it, but you still do it or something.
Okay. This is college. And I don't throw no stones at the athletes that I work with. I do not sit up there and tell them, what is it? Calling the kettle black? I never do that. Lord, have mercy. Especially being a baseball player. Baseball players, some drinking fools. We drink some stuff up. We drink like you ain't never seen before. Before games, after games. They stopped that during all this. So you got peer pressure, but not only peer pressure around substance use, but you got peer pressure around, look, you're the athlete on campus. What have you done, or what are you going to do, or are you playing, or are you getting enough playing time? You got peer pressure on campus. You got peer pressure at home. You got peer pressure everywhere. Yes, sir.
So those of you who either are or aren't student athletes, let's say student athletes, how many of y'all grew up in like a predominantly black neighborhood? All right? Now let's say y'all got recruited to go to Iowa or Nebraska, right? Your best offer was to go to like some town in the Midwest, in Iowa or in Nebraska. What would be some of the things you would have to deal with going from where you grew up to where most of these major colleges are?
Say what? Who said that? Culture change. What's culture? Like what? What you grew up around, what you know, like what? How you live, but tell me some specifics. I know when I came to UTSA, when I came to San Antonio, I was looking for a Bojangles. Right. There's no Bojangles here. It was shocking. It impacted my mental health. There's no Bojangles? What else do we talk about when we talk about culture? Real talk. This is real talk now. Music. What else? Morals, people with the same values and whatnot. What else?
How they dress.
How you dress. How you go about your everyday activities. Whether it's dress, music, culture, the way people talk, food you eat. But real talk. When we talk about, and I'm sorry, I promise I saw you raise your hand. You good? Okay. Real talk. The schools that Doc mentioned, when a student athlete goes there, and a particular black student athlete, you're talking about you probably, outside of you being on campus, the campus is probably about 2, 3, 4% black. Now let's talk about that.
Outcast.
Say what?
Outcast.
Outcasts is, yeah, might be. Now there's differences everywhere, right? Nothing is absolute. But for the most part, a lot of college athletes, especially those who play football, basketball, run track, you walking around campus at some of these major institutions, and you might not see you except when you go to practice. How can that impact your mental health? Talk to me. Because some of y'all ain't said nothing yet. You feel alone? Some of y'all ain't said nothing yet. You feel uncomfortable? You feel out of place? What else? You could be antisocial. Okay. So for real. And y'all can go out and run this experiment if you want to for the next 7 or 8 days. Only hang around people who don't look like you and see how you feel. Just in case you don't know. Say what? That's every day. Because the colleges that Doc named are not much different from here. Do you know how many faculty members there are at UTSA? Somebody throw out a number. How many faculty members are at UTSA? How many? Keep going. Keep going. We have 1,000 right now. Keep going. 7,000. Go down. Go down. Go down. 3,000. Go down. It's about half of 3,000. What's half of 3,000? 1,500. 1,500. Anybody want to take a guess on how many black faculty there are on UTSA's campus? It's us too. How many?
10. It's like 50.
50 is very close. Out of about 1,500 faculty, it's 47 of us. Is that right, Doc? No. Excuse me. Out of 1,500, it's not 47, it's 27. So when the doc and I, we walk into most meetings, we the only ones. Now, it's not like it's not cool people out here. You know, I'm not trying to cast anything. I ain't trying to go out here and we start doing the Ferguson. I ain't trying to do that. But I'm going to tell y'all something. I know how I feel. You know, because I'm going to be real talk today, man, I was about to wear these Nikes that I got from Chicago with the little clear bottom on them, and they got a bunch of colors on them that I dropped some money on, but I was like, nah, I can't come up there looking like that. I'm going to be looking stereotypical and whatnot. But I really wanted to wear my Nikes and impress y'all. If y'all see me around campus, you know, if y'all see me with them on, y'all give me, you know. But I can't do that. And so back to the mental health piece and being a black athlete on a predominantly white campus, or in this case, we're a predominantly Hispanic serving university. It's difficult. It's hard on your mental health. It's hard. It's really hard. Any other things that when Doc mentioned, you know, being on a campus, a predominantly white campus, or one of the campuses that might not necessarily be at HBCU, how might that affect students and student athletes? Anything else that we haven't talked about? Especially for them people who haven't contributed. One of your goals, every class, should be to contribute. Every class. I will argue that if you go into every class and be dedicated to contributing something to that class, you're going to be successful in that class. Anybody? I'll raise. One of the things that I remember in being a student athlete at UNC and the University of North Carolina at Charlotte is when I came to class, I didn't feel like I could say anything. You know, I didn't feel as if people would understand my perspective. You know? Yes, sir.
I feel like, well, me being an athlete, they look for me to mess up quicker. Less
room, less leeway. Less leeway to make mistakes. Athletes live in a fishbowl. Everybody looking at the student athlete. You know, one of the things that our coach used to tell us was, okay, well, if you don't want people to look at you as a student athlete, start wearing your gear all the time. Then maybe they don't know who you are. Unless you 6'5", 225 or something. Then we know who you are. Yes, sir.
Probably just piggybacking off what everyone else is saying, probably paranoia, just from like the situation if you are going to a college where, you know, obviously you're going to be standing out, just paranoia of making sure you're doing what you're supposed to do, because if you're like taking care of someone or if your family's dependent on you, you don't want to mess up, like the paranoia of making sure you're always doing what you're supposed to be doing, making sure that, you know, you make that spot of recruiters are coming in, making sure you're just kind of paranoid and making sure you're going to, you know, be on top, I guess.
Okay. And sometimes we can call it paranoia because paranoia is something that us social workers use. What us social workers use for diagnosis is called a DSM-5. Doc can put that on the test too. The Diagnostic Statistical Manual, number 5 edition. It has all types of disorders. Paranoia, substance abuse. There's a disorder for being addicted to caffeine. There's several levels of depression, bipolar disorder, eating disorders. There's also a disorder in the DSM-5 if you have sex too much.
What's DSM stand for?
DSM, Diagnostic Statistical Manual. It is the diagnostic manual used by social workers. And another word that I want you to write down in terms of paranoia is sometimes we just call it anxiety. Everybody say anxiety. We have all types of anxiety. You might have an anxiety related to speaking in class. You might have an anxiety related to speaking to people in social situations. Again, that's something that Ricky Williams and actually a lot of athletes have. Unless they're in front of the camera. Being in front of the camera is different than being in front of people. Sometimes they say being in front of people is more pressure than being in front of the camera. So you have anxieties. Anxiety, sweating, elevated blood pressure, okay, nervousness. That's when we talk about anxiety. So we have this fella, Anthony Von Tour. Gave you a couple examples of mental health issues in athletics. One, concussions and the complications of the concussions such as depression. Another complication of concussions is the early onset of dementia. The next, bipolar disorders. And that's what Anthony Von Tour suffered. Periods of depression, lows, and periods of high times, which are manic, what we call manic. All right? Another common disorder that we deal with in college athletics is our eating disorders. Is anybody familiar with eating disorders? Cool. Tell me what you know about eating disorders.
And basically, it's like you always concerned about how you look to other people, so you try not to eat too much, starve yourself and whatnot.
There you go. Okay, and on the other end of anorexia, you have what? Bulimia. Okay, and bulimia is characterized as overweight. Now, how many people know a black athlete, male or female, who's had an eating disorder? No. Okay, one. Eating disorders amongst two. Eating disorders amongst black student athletes, for some reason, athletes in general, seems to be rare. Don't know if we hide it, but it seems to be rare when we compare it to other ethnicities. So we have bipolar disorders, depression, talked a little bit about eating disorders. We've also touched on anxiety. Anxiety is a mental health disorder. And it's important that a lot of people recognize this. If you're in a setting, where you get nervous, your blood pressure goes up, you start sweating, confused thinking, you're not able to critically think, and you're not in Macy's, and you ain't trying to take something, I'm just playing. Or the police ain't behind you. Man, I'm telling you, I get in these elevators with these police now, and I get nervous. Then it's possible that you are suffering from some form of anxiety, and it's important to know that. So anxiety, eating disorders, bipolar disorders, depression. But when we talk about black athletes, what also, Doc, go ahead.
I was going to say, so you talked about being in front of the camera, different than talking in front of a group of people.
Yeah.
Right? As student athletes, what I noticed is that they perform, in some cases, in front of thousands of people on the team.
Yeah.
And this is not all cases, but in some places in class, it's difficult to speak.
Yeah.
And so recognizing that anxiety as a disorder, you know what I'm saying? It's contextual, but then how do you deal with that? To maximize the opportunity that you have here. Or even if you're not a student athlete, just a regular student, right? You're new to college, a new environment. What are steps like students can take to kind of overcome that?
The first, and that's a great question to ask. The first thing is that you have to recognize and you have to accept it. All right? You have to recognize and accept you have anxieties in certain situations. You might not believe this, but is anybody familiar with personality styles testing? Probably some of you have done it. Okay. You know extroverts and introverts, right? Okay. I'm an introvert. And sometimes I have to get up and speak in 25, 50, more people, 100, whatever. And I'm an introvert. I mean, when I came up in here, I doubled up on the deodorant because I'm an introvert. The first thing you have to do is recognize it. The second thing that you have to do is research it. What I would do is research it. Because one of the key treatments of certain anxieties, especially social anxiety disorders, are simple things like meditation. If you're a student athlete or a student in here, I encourage you to engage in meditation. It's not very difficult, something you can research online, looking at meditation. Or if you're not into meditation, there's something closely related called mindfulness training. The other thing that you can do is, y'all as students have purchased certain services here on campus, and one of them are counseling services. And let me tell you something. My philosophy as a counselor, and most counselors' philosophy as a counselor, is we have one thing. You are not broken, and we do not fix you. You come to us to talk to us, to learn more about yourself. That's the essence of going to a counselor. You talk to them so that you can learn about yourself. They don't give you answers. You actually give them the answers, and you decide after talking with them what's the best route for you. For some reason, athletes have a lot of anxieties with regard to social situations, and I don't understand. I do understand why. I do. Because for the most part, you got people, once you're a certain caliber athlete, you got people walking up to you. So you ain't got to say nothing. You know? If you're a guy or a girl, you know, especially with regard to opposite sex or real talk, same sex, whatever, however you roll. But you got people coming up to you. You got people in the community coming up to you. You got kids coming up to autographs with you. Everybody comes to you. But what a lot of college athletes don't realize is there are certain points where you have to come to the people. In the classes that I teach, I have 14 students and I have 17 students. We don't leave class until everybody's contributed at least twice per class, or we don't leave. And one of my classes on Monday Night Football, so I'm trying to get them fools to realize that we got to step it up. And I'm just saying fools in a loving way. But the other thing that we think about in social situations is, anybody wonder why all these NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, tennis players, does anybody ever realize why? Does anybody ever think about why is it that these guys keep getting caught with these women? And some of them, they think women and they ain't women. I like Greg Anthony, but bless his soul. God bless him. Why? It's easy. You think it's easy? That's one reason. Guys, chime in.
They become a target.
They become a target. Trying to get your status up. That's why these guys keep getting caught with these women, where they paying for services. Dumb. Okay, what?
They're just not good at hiding. They're just not good at hiding stuff like that. Like, they dumb about it.
Not good at hiding stuff. Okay, these are all plausible hypotheses. Any more?
I think they could be paying them because, like, in a sense, to like leave them alone after the service. I guess, like, you know, like they might have wife and kids.
You keeping it real, ain't you? Go.
I mean, I'm just saying what you know. Like, that's what it is. Like they might have wife and kids at home, so they might like, okay, well, okay, you just do whatever, do what you do.
Okay.
And, you know, come home to the wife and kids.
Okay, and that's a good reason. I mean, not a good reason. Excuse me, y'all. I ain't judging nobody. That is a reason that we talk about. Yes.
But along with what Devin was saying, it's like the way that the whole pimp game runs. It's like there's unwritten rules, right? When you purchase a prostitute, it's the one-time transaction you've done.
Yeah, right.
And there's not supposed to be any baby mama drama afterwards. Paid up front.
Paid up front. It's the understanding.
It's supposed to be
Okay.
less risky, actually.
Now, I wish we was on Family Feud so we could see which ones are the top reasons. That's what I really want to do. We need Steve Harvey up in this piece. Next time I come in here, I'm going to come with a Family Feud type game because I want to know which one ranks on the top. But here's my theory. Here's part of my theory, because I think that Doc's theory, and what's my man right here? Devin. I think that's pretty good. And all of them play a role. But you know what part of it is? I think some guys don't have no game. They ain't got no game. Because everything, they used to everything coming to them. They haven't worked on their social skills because they got anxieties about talking to people. So they ain't got no game. They don't know how to walk to somebody, you know, what's up, girl? You know what I mean? You know, checking you out and whatnot. You know what I'm saying? Looking pretty fly and whatnot. You know, you flex and you got your tattoos out and all this type of thing. Some people don't know how to do that. So then they get caught up. All they know how to do is make a financial transaction. And they get caught up. That's my theory. Y'all say, where you going with this? I'm going all the way back to social anxieties about speaking to people. You know, one of the things that I used to do when I was at the University of Maryland, we used to teach communication skills to athletes because there are a lot of anxiety. So let's go back to what I was talking about. I was talking about bipolar disorders, depression, eating disorders, anxiety. We talked a lot about, what are the issues around college athletics that impact a student athlete's mental health? Peer pressure. Okay? You got time management. Some other prevalent issues that we also talk about are the reality is that you're here to play, for a lot of folks, I'm here to play a sport, for real. I got nothing against that. That's where I went to college. I went to hit baseballs out of the park. When the professors, you raise your hand, they say, well, why are you here in college? I'm here to hit baseballs out of the park. That's why I'm here. So you got issues related to your performance. You got issues related to the classroom. You got homesickness. You got family issues that are going on. All of these things are germane to your mental health. And I can take this, it's not just athletes, student athletes, but also students. You have all of these issues. And one of the things that I want to encourage you to do and encourage you to encourage friends to do is just be cognizant of it. The reality is that, man, we live in a crazy world. We live in a seriously crazy world. And self-care is an important thing. This world in and of itself can make you crazy. You could wake up this morning, you ain't bothering nobody, and some crazy situation can go down that can impact your mental health. Yes, sir.
What's up, man?
Yeah.
No, I'll give you 5 minutes.
Oh, okay, 5 minutes. It was 5 minutes. And so one of the things that I encourage is self-care. Are there any things that I have not talked about when we talk about impacting, in particular, black student athletes' mental health? Anything at all?
What does Brandon Marshall have?
Brandon Marshall had depression. He has depression. Now, what depression is marked as, and I believe, and I might, somebody Google that right quick.
I think he's bipolar.
Is it bipolar? So his is a bipolar disorder. Somebody look that up right quick. Because that's a good point, because Brandon Marshall actually has a foundation around his bipolar disorder, if it is bipolar disorder. But again, bipolar disorder specifically is marked by 2 years or more of depression and manic episodes that last at least 2 weeks in time. That's the part that I miss with a bipolar disorder. We're not just talking about 1 day or 2 days. We're talking about prolonged episodes that last at least 2 weeks.
What do those episodes consist of as far as
The manic, it's sort of like you're on this high. You're irritable. You're easily excited, easily agitated. You don't sleep a lot. All of those things are related to a manic episode. And all of them are, these episodes are very much treatable through therapy and medication. I want you to understand something about bipolar disorder. Was that right, Doc? His bipolar? Did somebody look?
You said he got borderline personality.
Okay, so borderline personality disorder. Borderline personality disorder is marked by multiple personalities. We used to call it a multiple personality disorder. But it basically, in different situations, you experience anxieties. In different situations, you experience comfort. And so, in essence, you take on a different personality given the social situation. And one of the things that I can say about Brandon Marshall is he's been very vocal about it. He started a foundation around his work. The 1 in 4 project that I mentioned earlier, he actually provided some funding for them to have an event in Chicago around mental health disorders. So he's been very active in it. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to ask, for your professional opinion, and within the work that you do as a social worker in college athletics, how do you think we can eliminate the stigmas associated with mental health within college athletics and more specifically with black college student athletes?
Man, that's a great question. What's your name?
Miracle.
Miracle. That was a miracle question, Miracle. Because I couldn't have had a better question to end with. Let me explain it to you like this. Especially for athletes and people who are just physically fit. You cannot perform on the field at your best unless you are mentally healthy. One of the things that we're trying to do, Miracle, in terms of sports psychology and in terms of social work in sports, is we're trying to say, you know what, as hard as you go in the weight room and work out, as hard as you are on the track and work out, you need to work out mentally. Your mental health is just as critical to your success on the field and in the classroom as your physical health. Do you do as much for your brain and your well-being and your heart and your soul that you do for your muscles and your tendons and the other parts of your physical being? If you don't, then you can't be as successful as you want to be on the field. I've talked to athletic departments about putting up posters that talk about being mentally healthy. If you're not mentally healthy, you cannot perform in the field. If coaches call the timeout, or you in the huddle, and you sitting up here thinking about something that happened, you angry at somebody, or you homesick, or you're having a manic episode, there's no way that you're going to be able to execute the play. No way. You have to take time, self-care, to take care of yourself. You have trainers. You have counselors in the counseling center. You might not want to talk to your academic advisors, but you have people like me. I work with athletics. I've been here for a year. And again, mind you, we're only 2 of 27 black professors out of 1,500. That's less than 2%. Now, I don't know how many of those 27 are former college athletes, but I know I was, so I totally understand. There's nothing about college athletics that I probably haven't experienced or haven't worked with. But to Miracle's point, you have to believe that to perform in the classroom and on the field, you have to be mentally healthy. And basically, when we talk about people who are mentally healthy, we're talking about people who are able to cope with different situations. Whether it's on the field, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's at home, you have a coping mechanism in place. And the other part is, if you have one of these diagnosed mental health disorders, that either you are receiving some type of counseling and therapy and or medication. And the medication should not be a stigma. The medication, what you need to realize is that a lot of mental health disorders have to do with chemical imbalances. That's why men and women who experience the concussions, their chemical imbalances in their brain. There's nothing they control. People think that, well, you know, I don't want to say nothing about my mental health disorder because people are going to think I'm crazy. 1 in 4 in the United States suffer some type of mental health disorder. It's not something to be ashamed of. And I'm not saying that just to the student athletes. I'm saying that to everybody. Real talk, as I close, my daughter's mother suffered from a bipolar disorder. I was a single parent for 21 years. My daughter has a bipolar disorder that she has never wanted to deal with. And as a parent, I've had to watch it from a kid. See, she could get away with that stuff when she was a kid. She could get away with all of it. She could get away with those manic episodes and teachers would just excuse it. She could get away with some of that stuff and I would just excuse it. But now that she's in the real world, society is not excusing it. And she's having a challenge with it. Because I explained to her, some of the things you can do as a kid with a bipolar disorder, you can't do as an adult. Some of the things you do as an adult with a bipolar disorder will get you locked up. This is a great time to deal with it, whether it's you or whether it's a friend, while you're here at UTSA, because you have all these wonderful services. So, in closing, I'd like to thank you a lot, because y'all were very attentive. You provided me with some food for thought as I try and provide services for student athletes across the country and help departments of social work begin to come integrated into athletics. Some of the work that I talked to you today is online. I'm not the person to toot my horn, but I would like for you, if you're ever interested in looking at different college sports scandals or mental health in college athletics, Google me, cite me. You know what I'm saying? Whether it's Duke Lacrosse, Rutgers, Baylor, UNC, I've written on them all. So if you're writing a paper that has to do with something in sports, Google me, email me, cite me. It helps me out. And it enhances my mental health. All right. But most of all, I want to go back to what I said. Enjoy your time here at UTSA. Have the time of your lives. Hopefully I'll see some of y'all on campus. Take care.